Neat Nation, welcome to the Droopy Whiskey Show. It's kind of a two-part episode today. I've been through a lot of craft whiskey in 2021, and I'm not done. I mean, I've been through probably over 100 craft whiskeys at this point, but I want to taste some more. I want to go deep into Texas whiskey. I'm working on that currently, figuring that out. But I've tasted a lot of stuff, and I felt like it was time to give you a little bit of a recap, to be like, yo, I think there's some craft whiskeys that you should buy. Specifically, there's 8-ish. And I say ish because whenever I do these lists, it evolves. I mean, it keeps going. What can I say? We're going to start with 8, but it kind of spreads. There's specifically 8 distilleries I think you should be watching, and I'm going to help you dial into the particular products that they're releasing that you might want to be sipping. So that's what we're going to do today. Per usual, there's lots of fun stuff down in the comments area, the description, that area below. It's where you can support the channel if you want. You should like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what your favorite craft whiskey is. I'm curious if you're jamming on a particular craft whiskey that I've not tried. I mean, I want to try it. So let me know. Hit me up on Instagram if you want, at Droopy Whiskey. That's a good place where we could like dialogue maybe. Slide into my DMs. It's not sketchy. But for now, we got to talk about craft whiskey, and I don't want to keep you any longer than is absolutely necessary. So we have two things we're going to do. Two things we're going to do today. Part one is this video, and that's I'm going to give you the rundown of those distilleries. Second video is going to be a tasting where I pick the best craft whiskey that I've had this year. One caveat. For these videos, I'm not counting straight MGP that's been blended. So no straight rye that's just like a blend of ryes. No straight bourbon that's just like a blend of bourbons. What I am counting is if a distillery takes that juice and morphs it in any way that I felt like was unique enough to call it craft, I'm going to go ahead and count it. Yeah, I'm making up the rules as I go along. That's the MO. That's what I do. That's the Droopy Whiskey Show. That's the Droopy way, if you will. I'm probably going to taste some of these things as we go along, just to kind of pre-game for the taste off, where I pick my favorite one in the next video. Here we go. All right, first up, let's talk about a whiskey from my hometown. That is Still Austin. No, it's not really from my hometown. I'm not from Austin, Texas. It's from my home state. Don't know why I said hometown. Home state of Texas. I don't live there. I live in Wisconsin now. Anyway, Still Austin Distilling in Austin, Texas. Clever name. This is the cask strength release they had from 2021. I think they did 2 batches of this, and it's pretty remarkable. It's a 2-year-old bourbon, a rye bourbon. And for a 2-year-old bourbon, holy smokes. Like, I would have bet against a 2-year-old bourbon being able to taste like this in any way. I mean, it's truly remarkable. It's really sweet, carries with it plenty of oak. It's kind of reminiscent of Elijah Craig. It's like a younger Elijah Craig barrel proof. If you were to do Elijah Craig barrel proof bottled after like 5 or 6 years, it would probably taste like this. Not actually as good as Elijah Craig 12-year-old barrel proof, but far from stinking and quite enjoyable. So I give it a stamp of approval. And if you have an opportunity to buy the Still Austin cask strength release, I would recommend you do that. It was like $60, I think. Really reasonable price too. So, good job, Still Austin. The standard Still Austin release is fine. Still Austin bourbon, the whatever musician, it's like 91 point something % alcohol by volume. It's fine. It's decent. It's good. But this one is really remarkable. So, I'm looking forward to seeing what Still Austin does in the future. Let's move on to the next place, and this is a place if you've been watching the channel, you're pretty familiar with now, and that's Starlight Distillery out of Indiana, just over the river from Kentucky. Where in Indiana? Borden, tiny little place in Indiana. Not a big fan of the Starlight name, but I am a big fan of the Starlight place. So as I pour a little bit of a barrel pick we did, double oaked rye, the guidance I would give in relationship to Starlight is that you should be on the lookout for some of their barrel finishes. This one's a double oaked rye. We also picked an apple brandy finished bourbon. There's cognac finished rye, cognac finished bourbon. There's cigar blend. It's nothing like Magnus cigar blend, but it's the one they chose to moniker cigar blend. Is finished in some funky barrel or something. The barrel's really interesting. Anyway, bottom line is they're doing some really cool stuff with aging, and I feel like that's the best kind of products that they're releasing right now. I think their distillate is good. I think it just needs more time. It's not really ready at 4 years, given the straight whiskeys I've tasted, with one exception, and that is a single barrel that I highlight as one of my best craft whiskeys. This one was just a straight bourbon, 4.5 years old, 116.2 proof. So some of their barrels can kind of hit and be honey barrels, but a lot of their finished stuff is really, really good, including this double oaked rye. I was so pleased with this pick. Very sweet, candied lemons, spearmint, some oak with a double barrel, but it's not heavy. So it tastes like a straight rye that was only aged once, but because it's so young, that extra barrel really helped convey some age characteristics that it wouldn't have gotten at the 5 years old it currently is. Next up, I don't have a bottle for this one, but it's one, again, you should probably be familiar with, or fairly familiar with, and that's Chattanooga. Chattanooga, out of Chattanooga. Again, clever names here. They've been doing some interesting stuff with a lot of high malt bourbons, and it's a unique product. It doesn't taste like much else out there on the market, and it's pretty solid. It's a good deviation from the norm. Their bottle styling is on point. Like, they did a really good job with their packaging design. It's much more elaborate than this. This particular one I have here that stood out to me was the 111 proof cask strength release. You get malty characteristics on the nose, not too dissimilar from a barrel strength scotch, but it conveys a lot more sweetness up front, obviously from the corniness. The fact that bourbon's made with corn and not just malt. So Chattanooga's one, if you haven't tried it already, I would definitely recommend you look around, you find some, go to a bar maybe, taste it up, see if you like it. It's probably not for everybody, and even tasting it now, it's not my favorite of the year, but it's definitely one I have to call out. They're also, as many craft distilleries are, doing a lot of interesting stuff with barrel aging, with different mash bills, and the general consensus is it's pretty good. You don't hear a lot of people talking crap on Chattanooga. I wouldn't do it either. Alright, let's go to the next one. Next one, which I've also talked about a little bit on the channel, is a Wisconsin one from Dancing Goat Distillery. This is their Limousine Rye. This is the 6-year cask strength release that they dropped last year. Now, the deal with Limousine Rye is it is MGP. It's a 95.5 rye from MGP. But what they do with this particular rye is they built a Solera. Like, it's a pretty remarkable thing to behold, the way they age these ryes. So they age them, well, they age the rye for a little while in new oak. Then it enters the Solera. Then it goes back in used barrels for a little while. And then to age, so that's the third barrel. Technically, I mean, the Solera itself is like 12 barrels, so a lot of different barrels are touching this whiskey, but it doesn't taste like any other 95.5 MGP rye, and it's probably the result of the fact that a lot of different wood is up in this whiskey. Like, it's influenced by a lot of different stuff, and to me, it's pure Christmas. I really enjoy this whiskey. I would say probably right away, even before tasting it, it's not like, oh, my favorite. And as we do a little tasting here in a little bit about what my favorite one of the year is, it's probably not this one. But man, when the mood hits, it hits with it. Like, it's just right there, comforting. I mentioned this is kind of like a ginny rye, very botanical in nature, a la juniper, mint, anise, clove. Yeah, Christmas, as I mentioned. Dancing Goat is doing a lot of cool stuff, though. Like, the amount of stuff that they're distilling, the weird stuff that they're distilling, and the weird stuff that they're sourcing is going to make for some pretty cool projects. I had a Spanish oak finished bourbon that they were working on for a fairly large store. TBD, I'm waiting for this to be released because it was awesome. Like, fantastic. I've still got a little bit of it left right here. I'm saving it because it's so good. So, keep your eyes out for Limousine Rye, particularly the age-stated releases or the single barrels, as well as other projects that have not hit the market yet from Dancing Goat. Alright, I wish I had a bottle of this next distillery. I've got 3 samples, and these 3 particular barrels that I tasted, I loved them all. And we actually did a barrel pick from this distillery, and I don't have it yet. So I was thrilled with our barrel pick, and I have these other 3 samples that are really good, which makes this distillery super hot for me. I'm really high on this distillery. It's out of Columbus, Ohio, and it's Middle West Spirits. There probably needs to be a firm to work with these companies on naming their distilleries. That's just my take. But when your whiskey's as good as what I'm tasting out of some of these Middle West single barrels, it doesn't really matter what you call your distillery, because it's friggin' delicious. So the samples I have here are the Miquelon Reserve 4-grain bourbon. That's actually one that we picked. That's the product we picked. Then I have a straight wheat whiskey, and then I have their dark pumpernickel straight rye whiskey. Now, what does that mean? It's just, it refers to the grain, something about the grain, like whole grain versus part of the grain. I can't remember. Anyway, it's only 3+ years old, but man, was it good. Like, really, really good, and it was conveying a lot of oak and a lot of sweetness and a lot of richness. Gonna taste this in a minute because, this could be the best craft whiskey I had all year. If it stacks up with all these the way I remember it stacking up, it's gonna contend for sure. Middle West Spirits, don't sleep on it. Wait for our barrel pick, and if you haven't already, you want to support on Patreon, patreon.com/entryproofpodcast. You'll be one of the first to know when our barrel pick becomes available from Middle West. We also have one coming from Dancing Goat, actually an 8-year-old MGP bourbon. If you're a Patreon supporter, you'll get access to those picks. Alright, 3 more left before we get into the tasting. Next one is not going to be a surprise, and it's on Louisville's Whiskey Row. That's Peerless. You've probably seen Peerless somewhere before. They are doing rye and bourbon. This is a rye pick from Liquor Barn. It's a 3-year-old, 108.8 proof. And I forget who gave us, this was probably Tom. I think Tom Lynch, TFL Dad, Branch Extraordinaire. I think he gave us the sample. And I had not had Peerless that I liked to the extent that I liked this. And I really liked it. It was really, really solid. And I didn't hate any of the Peerless I've had. All their stuff, though, is still super young. I haven't had anything older than a 5-year bourbon from them. So as their stuff continues to reach greater levels of maturation, I'm going to get greaterly excited about it. Except for the fact that it's really expensive. Like some of their early ryes, like 2-year rye, 3-year ryes, like $90, $100. Like, no, guys, I'm out at that price. But I've seen their pricing kind of come down, even as their age statements go up. Good on them for that. But I don't know what was with that early pricing. Big problems there. Quality of what's in the barrel/bottle, not really problems there. So, good whiskey coming out of Peerless. Okay. ASW, out of Atlanta, Georgia. So ASW is doing some sourcing, doing some of their own stuff, creating really, in some cases, weird products. This product was really good. I had to call it out because it was in, my top list. It's going in the tasting for best craft whiskeys I've had. That said, this one is a bit of a mystery to me. It does say that it is sourced. So this is the Fiddler Georgia Heartwood single barrel cast strength release. It's bourbon whiskey refinished with hand harvested charred oak staves. On the back it says, we never chill filter add color to our whiskeys, finished and bottled by ASW. This says the spirit began its life as a foraged bourbon whiskey that the head distiller Jay Manglitz fiddled with. It is a wheated product. So they're sourcing this wheated product from somewhere. Is it MGP? Probably not. Given that it's wheated, could it be Bardstown Bourbon Company? It could. Could it be Wilderness Trail? Potentially. But honestly, I just don't know. It doesn't tell you what state it came from, just where it was finished and bottled. So a little bit of cloak and dagger. That said, whiskey's great. This particular single barrel kind of was light years better than anything else I'd had from ASW, which kind of goes to show a big lesson I've learned in all of my craft whiskey tasting this year, and that is that everybody's got good single barrels. Now, that means you could distill kind of marginal quality and still get lucky when a barrel pops. But I also think that it means that even if you're distilling great stuff and your stuff generally tastes young at 3 to 4 years, which most craft whiskey does, there's still going to be some single barrels that really sing and showcase what your product will generally taste like when it's much older, twice as old as 4 years. I mean, whatever they're doing with this refinishing, it's packing a lot of sweetness and some oaky notes, some cinnamon that I really, really like. And it's not as funky as like a Larceny product. It's pretty fruity and maybe some cherry up in there. Not as peanutty. Very nice. The last distillery / product I'm going to point you in the direction of tonight before we taste this off and decide what the best craft whiskey I had in 2021 so far is Boone County. Boone County is making all kinds of stuff. They're making wheated bourbon. They're making rye bourbon. They're making rye. They also have gin and stuff. Whatever. I like gin, but that's not why you're here. This 8-year-old wheated bourbon that I picked up at the distillery passing through, I haven't opened it yet. I'm about to open it because I tried it at the distillery and it was fantastic. Super good. I think it was like $90 I paid for this bottle. But I mean, look at the color on this. Probably a little hard to tell from the camera, but jeepers. Like, it spent some time in the barrel, and that barrel wore off in a really, really good way on this whiskey. And Boone County in general is doing solid stuff. They got famous sourcing MGP. Big surprise. A lot of people did. But they're now backing it up like New Riff with their own distillate. So good on them for crushing it at their own game after sort of getting a name via sourcing well-aged MGP. Their 6-year wheated is a little bit more common, actually available on certain retail shelves at certain times in the markets in which they distribute. This 8-year, as I mentioned, was distillery only, so I'm just recommending if you're passing through north central Kentucky, like going from Louisville to Cincinnati, Boone County is right off the highway. Get off the highway, go to Boone County, see what they got. And they've got, I mean, I paid really like $8 for a pour, or maybe a little bit more than that, of this 8-year-old. So they've got a nice bar there. They'll take care of you, I'm pretty sure. So those are some of my favorites from this year. I also had really solid stuff from Wilderness Trail, Driftless Glen, some interesting stuff out of Woodinville, and I'm sure many others that I'm just forgetting. But I did set these aside as I went throughout the year and said, you know what, those are going in my final tasting. And here we are tonight. So again, we've got Still Austin out of Austin, Texas. Starlight out of somewhere, Indiana. Borden, Indiana. We've got Chattanooga out of Chattanooga, right? Dancing Goat Distillery, just east of Madison, Wisconsin. So basically my backyard. ASW out of Atlanta, Georgia. So we're hitting all over the place here. And again, most of this is distilled by themselves. These two are sourced, but heavily altered. And this one's actually not MGP, likely. So, very crafty. And then Boone County. I also mentioned Peerless and Middle West. I've got samples here and here. So Middle West out of Columbus and Peerless out of Louisville. One caveat, I'm not counting Willet. Willet didn't qualify as craft for me. Bardstown Bourbon Company, just the scale of those operations and their reputations, I had to leave them out. Otherwise, that Black and Willet, I really like that. That would probably make a taste off, but I didn't qualify it. So, all right, y'all. Hope you enjoyed that rundown. Stay tuned. Tomorrow, I plan to release the the taste off, and you can see what the best whiskey I chose out of all these, what I picked as my favorite one for 2021. So stay tuned for that tomorrow. And then Thursday night, we'll be back on with another live stream with Abandoned Bourbon, Brian Bikey. You should follow him. His channel is Abandoned Bourbon on YouTube. He's my partner in conversation. We have a good time Thursday nights here at the Droopy Whiskey channel, live streaming. So tune in 8 o'clock Central for those. And then per usual, you can catch my videos dropping Monday mornings, generally speaking. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Droopy Whiskey, and click the links down below in the show notes to peruse more stuff. There's plenty more where this came from. See y'all later. Stay healthy, stay safe, and remember to keep it neat.